Welcome to part 2 of a set of keys. This has to do with human relationships, and as an introduction, the contents are here, the introduction and so on and so forth: sympathy, antipathy, friendship, sex, love, and further possibilities and ethical matters. This basically includes useful exercises in different ways according to various stages of application, as you will see for yourself. However, it's important to know that nothing here is compulsory. You only do what is useful to you. However, it's important to have previously acquired a certain familiarity with the techniques already noted. That is, a mastery of thinking. Otherwise, you will not have sufficient control to obtain useful results, and no attention that is subtle enough to pick up on the finer elements in these fields where instinct often has the overwhelming force. It should therefore be noted that the most stringent precision is needed for the practice of the following exercises in order to avoid falling into error and worse. This is because the consequences of these errors can be disastrous, since other human beings are obviously involved. Sympathy and antipathy. This is the word for the interplay of the relationships that we have with mere acquaintances. It's sympathy in the French sense, and its opposite, antipathy. They're the first levels of variation from the neutral condition that we feel towards somebody who is a total stranger, which we just otherwise refer to as indifference. You can easily evoke it by the following meditation. Imagine around you a bright red colour in which you are totally plunged, and then, at a given moment, suddenly change the colour to sky blue, then back to red, then blue, until the end of the exercise time of 5 minutes. This exercise leads to a real comprehension of what it is to be found in acceptance or sympathy towards another person, or rejection, also known as antipathy, towards a third party. One question can usefully be put to the awareness, that is, how can I precisely envision the feeling state that is involved? We then move on to friendship. To clarify the nature of friendship, it's useful to compare it to indifference. To do so, try smiling to a complete stranger, for example, someone you come across on public transport, and then try smiling at a friend to compare. For this exercise, it's useful to focus attention on the communion or the intimacy that is awakened. There's a more powerful variation which consists of hugging a friend, and compare that with a person who leaves us indifferent. But it's best to avoid children, not because they're unsuitable for this exercise because of their own structure, but because they're more open to friendly feelings than adults, and this can be misunderstood. In this case too, it's useful to bring to the attention the communion or the intimacy with the other person that is awakened in this way. I should point out that it's rarely necessary to perform this exercise more than once in order to understand what is at play. Sex. Now, this is an absolute minefield. Observations here are possible only once you have complete mastery of pure perception. In fact, the sensations that are involved in the sex act have such an overwhelming nature that all too often the awareness of the individual is simply overwhelmed. If the circumstances of life make it impossible to realize this exercise, you can, with true suitable precautions, try to carry it out by working on a remembered event. However, the usual role of the imagination in the erotic sphere is such that evoking by imagination must be avoided, and thus meditative investigation is totally impossible. 2 questions permit obtaining clues that imply knowledge of the difference between sexual relations and a loving relationship. The first concerns a relationship of love. During couplings, in the context of love, what is the role of the physical body? The second one is, to what extent does the conscious evocation of veneration and devotion during the sex act change it into an act that involves self-giving? The answers to these questions can be painful and bitter if they are truthful. And that is why it is advisable not to research this sphere until other exercises, such as basically everything in the first part, is mastered, because otherwise you're just heading for disaster. The next area is love, which is one of the main mysteries of life. We're referring to love of a platonic type which goes way beyond the carnal. This, if it is evoked, and the observer feels simultaneously touched in his or her erotic sphere, the following meditative task is advisable. Imagine the erotic sphere of the other party apart from yourself, and give it back to him or her as an integral part of their own being which you do not touch. Once you have overcome this obstacle, you can try, by agreement with the other person, to arrive at pure perception of the being which is incarnate in him or her, whilst looking deeply into his or her eyes. The questions which can turn out to be useful at this stage are: is there a limit on the number of participants for such reciprocal pure perception, either simultaneously or spread out over time? And how deep can I go in reciprocal pure perception with such and such a person, and again in absolute terms? The answers to these questions are both surprising and comforting. Of themselves, they suggest possible directions for further research. There are further possibilities, and the very fact that they're even mentioned here should give a clue for further working. The following questions in themselves are revealing. Does self-sacrifice have any role in love? What is the value of loving someone that you like in the first instance, in the first place, if you like? What do you do when you decide to love someone you don't like? What does it mean to be linked to somebody in life? What are the options for closer links with anyone? What can we learn from the phenomenon of adoption? Do we have to be loved or even liked in order to give of ourselves? What happens when we give love to our enemies? How do we weave a net of destiny to catch our fellow men? Does love stop at death? Is there anything that can stop love once it's been decided as a free self-gift? What does love teach us about karma? Can being right be ever be enough in ethical terms? There are more questions that can be answered, but from now on, I suggest you create them for yourself. Ethical issues. If, as is stated in books like The Secret, everything that a human wants can be provided without self-aware thinking, simply by magic as it were, there are a number of ethical considerations that need to be taken aboard. First of all, what do we want and why do we want it? Is deciding what we want just enough? Is it possible to school what we want so we can grow as we do so? What if what we want is harmful or detrimental to other people or to the whole world, for example, ecologically? What about the issue of selfishness? How about helping others? Can we help others if we do not know what they want? Can we ever really know what they want? Why should getting what someone wants be a good thing? How about the experience of spiritual growth through pain? What does life become if everything is easy and pleasant? What depth is left to life then? Can an easy life have any flavour? If we remove the disasters we need to grow from our fate, do we just create bigger, harder ones for later on? If we do not change, why should anything in our life change? Is change always for the better? Who is in the charge of destiny anyway? Are we up to the task of taking over our destiny for ourselves yet? And these are just starter questions. There are more that apply to love, money, and anything else that we desire. Thank you for your time. There will be more to follow. Thank you.